First to you, sorry.
Okay, we're ready.
Okay. So this is Saul Salia from Hope Valley, Rhode Island. Born and brought up here, right?
Right.
Tell us a little bit about where you were born and brought up.
Well, I was born actually in Providence. I guess my mother had some difficulty in extracting me, and ever since that time I've lived in the same house we're in now, namely 317 Switch Road. And I did leave, I joined the Army, and after that my graduate school was at Cornell, and I spent about 12 years away from Rhode Island, in New York and Indiana mostly.
You came back here and worked.
And then I came back here and worked for the state of Rhode Island for a while before being asked to join the university.
In your field at the university?
Actually, I was at the Graduate School of Oceanography on the Bay campus.
Okay, well, we have so much to talk about, Saul, but I started to ask you about the Polish people that have come to Hope Valley, so we'll start with that too.
All right.
What do you know about that?
Well, I know that the school bus that I took to the school in Wyoming at that time, which was a two-room schoolhouse, was full of Polish kids who got on the bus at a stop by the dam in Hope Valley now. And these were the children of parents who apparently worked in the woolen mill that was operating at that time. And I believe that most of them actually were working in the mill. And many of the children who started school wound up leaving school at 16 and joining the workforce.
Do you know why their parents left Poland?
No, I don't. I did not find that out. They were already here. Some of them, I think our family became friendly with one group, or one family, the Habreks, who have a farm not very far from our home. And since that time, we've been friendly with them. We knew Sam Habrek, who was the father of 3 boys who now are farming the same land.
And your earliest memories of Hope Valley?
Well, yes, I think the most impressive thing to me was the fact that there was a railway going into Hope Valley, and it stopped. Its terminus was a grain mill run by the Rawlings family, and we used to buy our chicken feed and cattle feed there, and it was always fun to visit there.
Did you ever ride the train?
Yes, we used to sort of sneak a little ride on it, and it seemed to run at fairly regular intervals between Hope Valley and Wood River Junction. And my friend, his name was Robert Perkins, lived in Woodville, and we would be fishing near the bridge trestle, and sometimes we'd hop aboard.
That's terrific. And would you just jump on the? They didn't have passengers in, but it just
no,
carry the cargo.
Yes, where they carried the Congo, actually an open door. We had to find something like that. My father used to get a free pass as a passenger on this train, I think it was sort of an advertising scheme by the Rawlings. Also, I remember that at that time, the chicken feed that we bought was called World Record chicken feed, because they had apparently, in cooperation with the university, developed a chicken mash that produced lots of eggs or good growth, I guess.
Would it be blended there in Hope Valley? Would they?
Yes, yes. The blending, the milling was done there, and sometimes the air was quite dusty.
Do you remember
And
the
I
fire?
remember a chute that the grain bags would fall down when we purchased the grain there. I do not remember details of the fire at all.
You probably were not here. I think it was like
Yeah.
1946 or 7.
Yeah, and at that time I was either in the army or possibly out of the state. At least as I said, I certainly would have remembered that had I been in Rhode Island at that time, because that was a big disaster.
And after that, the train stopped.
That's correct. And in fact, it was my understanding that the railway tracks were removed as material for building tanks, or whatever. The steel was taken and remelted.
You remember about your parents ever riding the train? Did they use the train?
No, they didn't. They bought the grain, but my father never rode the train.
Didn't
No.
use his pass.
No, he didn't use his pass.
Did you know any of the people that worked on the train, the engineer?
No, I just knew a Mr. Reach Schofield, who was a sort of the manager of the grain mill. And I have one very interesting story to tell. My father was an acrobat in his youth, and he was a very strong man. And one of the things he did was he used to pick up a grain bag and hold it in his teeth, a 100-pound bag. And that was one of the acts that he did in the circus and vaudeville. He used to do a handstand on flying rings and hold a man by a bit in his teeth.
And I remember he also did something called head-to-head.
Oh yes, they did a head-to-head stand. My father's partner would do a headstand, while my father was usually the bass man.
He would balance on his head.
Yeah, and balance on his head, yeah. And
tell us a little bit about the Finnish population in Richmond and Hope.
the Finnish population was not as aggregated as the Polish people were. The Finnish people, most of them always were found near water, and that was because they had saunas or built saunas before they built the house, and the water was a necessary part of the sauna business. Namely, you go take a dip in the river or in the pond after the sauna.
Why did the Finnish people come to Hope Valley, to Richmond?
I know my parents came, they visited a friend in Coventry, a Finnish man, and he said there was a place for sale in Hope Valley. And they looked at it and liked it and thought that that'd be a good place for sort of a summer cottage. Well, my father then went on tour, and my mother stayed at the house, which was only partly constructed at that time, and she liked it. And that's how then my father started, after he retired from the acrobatics. You could do that only until a certain age, and then you start going down, and my father didn't like the idea that he was no longer able to do what he did as a younger man, and he quit. And he worked in a mill, and he also became a carpenter. And he was a carpenter primarily because he was so strong that when they had to shingle church steeples, for example, he could hang on with one hand and and do the steeple work. And from there he did a lot of construction work, then working for a family by the name of Link in Charlestown. He was a contractor.
When you went to school, you went to Richmond Elementary School?
Went to, the first school was the Wyoming. It was a two-room schoolhouse that is now located, that was located exactly where the, I guess the part of the Richmond, whatever you want to call it, the mall there.
Oh, really? Where the job lot is and the other?
No, on the other side of the road. It's where the Cumberland Farms is.
Oh, okay. That's where the school was.
That's where the school was. Yes. And it had two rooms, and that's where I started school. And I know that it was a little difficult for me. I didn't speak any English at that time, and I guess the kids were a little bit, they pick on somebody who's a little different. And my mother got her friends. Some of them were domestics, and they got a lot of used clothes, and I wore them. And one of the kinds of clothes I wore were short pants, and all the Polish kids had knickers, and so I was sort of ostracized for wearing short pants. At least they made a joke of it, and that sort of annoyed me and embarrassed me a bit.
Was there animosity between the Polish children and the other children in the school? Was there kind of...
No, there really wasn't, at least to my knowledge. It seemed to me the Polish children were a majority, at least in the first few years of my school.
Where did they live mostly? They
lived mostly right near the mill. There's a hill on the other side of the road from the mill, and there were essentially what I guess they call them factory houses, and they lived in these.
And where was the mill located?
The mill was right at the base of the falls there. There were two buildings. One was on right next to the falls, and the other building was below on the other side of the road.
There's several waterfalls, however, so I'm confused which waterfalls you
This is the waterfall that's on Switch Road. It's a sort of a horseshoe-shaped fall.
In Wyoming, up here?
No, not in Wyoming, but right when you go down Mechanic Street Hill.
Yeah.
When you're going down towards the high school?
Yeah, when you're going.
Oh, it's that one. Okay.
Yeah,
yes.
it's that one.
Yeah.
Oh, that one. Okay.
Yeah, and on the other side there's a little road that goes up, and there's a housing development there, and that's where virtually all of the Polish children came from.
That area. Okay.
Right.
And they worked at, there was a mill over there on that side of the river too, right?
Well, yeah, that was there, and I remember also that these houses were not very well equipped with running water, etc. And there was a big tub in the mill, and the kids and the adults, for that matter, used to take their baths in it.
The mill.
In the mill, yeah.
Was that tub designed for that purpose, or was
I
it used
doubt
for
it.
other?
I think it was a dye vat or something
Dye
like
vat,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
And that mill burned?
That mill burned, and no, that actually, yes, I guess both of them burned. Or part of them burned anyway. It used to be a woolen mill. They would reprocess wool and make blankets out of them, and I was told that they were making army blankets. They are blankets for the army.
And did some of the Polish workers also work in the machine shop, the machine factory? Nichols Langworthy mill, where they made the big boilers?
No, not that I know of.
They
I
mostly
think
worked in the
they
fabric.
mostly worked in the fabric.
There was another mill called the Stone Mill. Was that located over there too?
I have not heard that term, stone mill, no.
Do you know Mr. Colazzi? John
Well,
Colazzi?
yes, I know the elder Mr. Colazzi
And his wife?
and his wife, and my family used to go there to eat and drink beer, and I became quite familiar with the place. And then, interestingly, Mr. Colazzi's daughter, Geraldine, became my first secretary at the University of Rhode Island.
Witala, right?
Yes, he's now Jerry Witala, yes.
Did you go shopping in Depot Square?
In where?
Depot Square?
I don't know the term,
Oh,
Depot.
Depot Square is where the railroad ended. At the
Oh.
depot there behind which now the Hope Valley.
Oh
Fire
yeah,
Station.
there were two stores that we frequented, three actually. There was a Sherman's clothing store in that building where Mr. Woodmansey has his.
Oh, it was the clothing store was there.
Yeah, it was downstairs on there. There was a post office upstairs where his office is now. And there was a meat market that was owned by the father of Mr. Stanley, the police chief. And next to it was an A&P. And one of my Polish friends was a chap by the name of Edward Hoyinski,
Oh, okay.
and he was one of the few Polish kids who graduated from high school, and he worked in the A&P there, and then I guess also worked as assistant manager of the new one when it was built.
I remember Kowalski. I remember
Yeah.
the name. Yeah. And then at some point, I guess they built a brick building where the post office moved across the street to where Western Auto used to be.
Yeah, that's right. There was a post office there.
The post office over there. Did you ever go to any shows where Woodmansey is now? I guess upstairs it was the Oddfellows building, and they used to have.
We did not. My family went. The Finnish people are fairly active thespians, and we used to go attend plays in Voluntown. There was a Finnish tourist hall there. And
What would plays be like?
beg pardon?
What were those plays like?
Well, they were drama, for example. One of them I remember was a story about a log drive, and somebody was injured, I believe, in the log drive, and that was a story that I remembered.
And these were done in English?
Oh no, in Finnish.
In Finnish. So
Yes.
there was enough of a Finnish community to support a theater?
Yes, a small theater, and the Finnish people were aggregated somewhat in Connecticut, mostly chicken farmers. And those Finnish people around here were isolated more or less. There were a couple of Finnish families at Pasqueezet Pond in Charlestown, and
certainly around Beach Pond, right?
around Beach Pond there were a number of them, yes. And then we had one Finnish family in Westerly that we knew very well. They owned a commercial steam bath, a sauna, yeah. And they, I remember it was 25 cents a piece to go take a sauna there.
Do you remember what their name was?
Nurmi. It's the same as the famous Finnish runner, Paavo Nurmi. His name was Otto Nurmi, N-U-R-M-I. That was the owner, and he had a son, Eugene Nurmi, who was a good friend of mine, and he wound up working for the Atomic Energy Commission in Tennessee.
So, do you still speak Finnish?
Oh yes, yes.
Can you say,
Good day, or
well, I'm going to go to Depot Square to catch the train?
minä menen Hope Valleyin otan junan.
Could you say it one more time?
Minä menen Hope Valleyin ja sitten minä otan junan.
Thank you.
When we had Estonians visiting us 15 years ago, Saul was able to communicate
Really?
pretty well with them.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's
Wow.
Estonian
closely.
and Finnish are closely related. It's said that Hungarian is supposed to be a Finno-Ugric language. Well, I have not found any kind of correlation there. Looking at words, very primitive words like fire and water, they have very different sounding names in Hungarian.
Going to school in Wyoming, and then after school in Wyoming, you had to go to Westerly to school. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. I went to high school in Westerly.
Did you
then.
take a bus there? Or-
Yes, from Woodrow Junction. I had to get to Woodrow Junction somehow, sometimes walking, sometimes my parents would take me, and sometimes I biked. And
And I remember one time, it was 1938. What happened to you then?
oh yeah, that was the day, the time of the famous hurricane. And I guess I was in junior high school at that time, and we saw that the wind was blowing very, very strongly from the school, but the bus came anyway, and we got on the bus and we got about a half a mile toward Hope Valley, and the trees fell and the bus was stopped, and as I recall, we walked back to school, and then we started sort of organizing, and there was a Mr. Applin who was a teacher there, and he and the bigger kids like myself helped the younger children, and I walked then from the Richmond School to Hopkins, to Rockville, to bring some of the smaller kids. Then I walked from Rockville to my house, and I got at home about midnight on that particular day. And our house had been badly damaged. We had lost our chimney and part of our roof, and my parents were waiting, wondering what had happened to me, and were very happy to see me again.
But you escorted some children home?
Yeah, Mr. Applin, the teacher, walked all the way with me, and he obviously walked back again. And there were just a tangle of trees on the roads, and it was very difficult. And of course, after the hurricane, there was all kinds of work to clean up.
Is there anything else that you would like to talk to us about Hope Valley? And,
No, I can't think of
you were
anything.
born in what, 1924?
24.
So in the hurricane you were 14.
Yeah, that's right.
And in 1941 you went to war?
I joined the Army in 1942, I was. And when I was just started as a freshman at Purdue. And I wound up in the infantry ultimately, and
You
wound
trained
up
at
in.
the Citadel.
Oh yeah, in fact I was
Part of an elite corps, right?
it was we were being trained to become engineers actually, and then they pulled us out when the invasion took place, and I came into France through Marseille, and I got as far as the Maginot Line, and I got hit, and then I got spinal meningitis, and I was in the hospital for months, and that was the end of the end for me.
Maybe that saved your life.
Yes, I think it did. The mortality from what we were doing was high. We were in what was called an intelligence and reconnaissance platoon, and that meant we had to go behind the lines at night and see if we could hear where the Germans were, and it was not it was quite a bit of loss. So yeah, I feel very fortunate. I've been living on borrowed time for some time.
And living very well.
Yeah.
Well, if there's anything else that you'd like to say, Carla, do you have any questions? No? Okay.
Okay, good.
Super.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
By the way, you look great.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay, now.
Going out of Hope Valley, up that hill?
No, going into Hope Valley from Switch Road.
Oh, okay.
At
Yeah.
the top of
Yeah,
that
yeah,
hill.
yeah. Top of that hill.
There's
Okay.
a building on the right. It used to be a store, Sakala store, and a fellow by the name of Vincent Kutskadan lived in a house right there, and he is still alive, and he lives on the road to Whitwell. He would know a lot about the Polish people there because he.
That'd be really good. So I need you to sign this. This just allows us to use the tape.
Okay.
That's a pencil we want to pen.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't think about that before. Vincent Kutskadan.
Okay, Vincent. Can you spell his last name? So does he live on Acadia Road?
Yeah, he lives. I think it's 100 is the number of his house.
Here, I have a question. After I finished recording
Yeah.
Saul, I don't want to erase it. How do I go to the next?
It won't
place?
erase, it'll pick up at the end.
Pick up at the end. Yeah, that's terrific.
Yeah. And you know Ruby, right? You would ask her to come.
Yes, I did. We met a long, long time ago.
Yeah, well,
So why don't you tell you about that?
Yeah.
Just wait 1 second.
Hang on. We have to get organized.
yeah, I got a couple of little stories that I could
Yes,
tell
right
you
there.
about.
That's what we want to hear. Just tell the stories,
Yeah, but not yet,
okay?
not yet,
That'll be
not
great.
yet.
Not yet, though. We have to.
Yeah,
Get some stuff together.
And I have plenty of tapes downstairs, but we have 25 minutes left on this particular tape.
Okay, that
so
should
we
be
must
enough,
have
but
focus.
we've got Ruby waiting down here. What Ruby's waiting?
No, Ruby Price is a cute little girl. She's little Bobby Price.
Yeah.
Oh, it's this way.
Oh, good.
Hang on. Yeah, that helps. All right. Can you say good morning?
Good morning.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm all set.
You want me to hold this on my lap?
I want you to sit right there.
I do want to mention I do have a hearing aid in
Right.
one ear.
Okay.
Okay.
When I was a little boy, this fellow was working in a store for his Uncle Morris, where West Bakery is now.
Oh,
And
good.
he was.
Stay right here,
he was
Fred.
the
We'll
clerk.
use
Yeah.
you. Okay.
Okay. But hold
Yeah.
on just a second. Fred, if you're going to stay here, which I hope you will, sit right beside Linda, okay?
So we'll pick your voice up.
My wife is here, you know.
I just gave her a kiss. We're all right.
I'll be the chaperone, okay? All right. So we're all set.
So this is John Wilcox. Could you tell me where you were born and what year you were born?
I was born in Matunic, Rhode Island, in the year 1/11/17.
1917, the same year my mother was born. That's very nice.
Yeah,
And did you move to Hope Valley when you were young?
3 years old.
And why did your family come to Hope Valley?
My father was a native of Hope Valley, but he married a girl from Davisville, Rhode Island, and they first lived in Matunic for, as I said, the first 3 years, and then they moved back up here and lived up on one of the tenement houses on High Street in Hope Valley, which is now High View, they call it now, because and then a year later we moved to trying to think of the name, well, Ted Peters lived. You remember?
Penna Road.
I was trying to think of the name of that place.
Penna Hill Road, no, John.
Yeah, it's it's on the Fender Hill Road. But I was trying to think of the name of the
property had a name for it.
I didn't even know it had a name, John.
Big farm there?
Well, it's not a big farm, but it was a farm.
Because my land borders that land.
Yes, yeah.
And we lived there for a year anyway. And then my father bought the house, big house on the corner of
Highview
High
and
Street.
Yeah.
And I lived there until I got married.
What did your father do?
My father was, well, basically a carpenter. Because it's times when things were a little bit tough, he had to piece out with other jobs, you know. So, but he basically, he did carpentering, and eventually my brother and I worked with him. And then eventually my father retired, then my brother and I took over. And then in 1963, I took a maintenance job for Warner Brothers in Ashaway, and later my brother got in too over there. Yeah. And but I say, after I left school, I worked where Carl Smith had a market garden near. He lived where the
That's what they call the herb garden.
herb garden. That's it. And because my first job was on my hands and knees weeding most of the time, and that's part of my trouble with my knees today. And then that fall I went to work for my Uncle Morris, who at first started out as a barber in the building where Spring Street Market is, in the back part. He barbered there for a short time.
The back of which market? Spring Street Market.
Spring Street Market, yeah.
Yep.
And then he decided, when they finished the building where the West Bakery is, he decided to open a store in one side, in the area where the bakery is. And he sold soda, ice cream, candy, patent medicines, and magazines, newspapers, and so forth. So I worked there from December of '34 until the end of 1939. Then I had to take find another job, because things weren't going too good with his store, and he was having trouble keeping up with his expenses, so he had to lay me off. And then I went for a short time into the Ashaway mill, woolen mill, Ashaway woolen mill, and then I worked in a spinning room, and when I felt I knew enough about spinning, I went and see a fellow by the name of Sam Wright, who worked for what used to be the owners of Georgia Ewers here, Saul and Dave Barish, and he was a boss in that mill they had in River Point, so he got me into there, and I worked there until April of that year, and then I went to work with my father and brother, and then I worked with them up to I forgot just what it was, the date, but I had a chance to get into electric boat, and so I went there during the war. And soon the war was over, of course they started laying off people, and they had gone from 14,000 down to 5,000, and I was going to have to, I could have stayed, but I was going to have to go on days and would be driving there alone, and I didn't want to continue driving that distance, so then I went back to work with my father and brother, and that's when we worked together until my father retired, and then in 1963 I took a maintenance job at what was known as Warner Brothers, who had their main place was in Connecticut. I forgot the name of it anyway, and so I stayed there until they sold out to a company by the name of Collins and Aitman, who had a plant similar to their plant down south. Well, Collins and Aitman put in a lot of new machinery and so forth. They run it for a couple of years. Then they started moving all their new machinery down to their plant in the south. So then I had three choices. I had a chance to go to work at Kenyon Peace Dye or Posy Seal in North Shore, they were a valve company, or Harris printing press company in Pawcatuck. So I took the job at Harris because my two sons and my son-in-law worked there. But then shortly they had a layoff, and naturally I had to go. So then I went to Posy Seal, and I worked at Posy Seal till I retired. And that was almost 20, well, it would be 25 years ago this Christmas when I retired. So I've been retired since then.
Tell us what you remember about the train in the depot.
About the plant?
The train in the Hope.
The
about
trains, John.
the railroad.
The
And-
trains, the railroad at
Oh,
Maple Square.
well, I remember that they originally was not only haul freight and stuff, but they also carried passengers back and forth from here to Woodruff Junction. And I can remember when they had the old steam train engine, then later they had a gasoline engine, and of course there was a station there at that in the area and back where there used to be the granary, and then eventually, of course, Rollins took it over because to haul its grain, and that's practically all I really know about the train. Other than
Did
that,
you ever ride on the railroad? Did you ever
I never
take a-
did
you
get to
didn't?
ride on it. No,
Did you ever hitch a ride on it?
no, no. I've been on the train, but I had never on that one.
That's what that, it sounds or smells or stuff like that.
Do you remember the sound